And nice to meet you all. Do I have a memo?
Yes, sir.
Great, thanks. Okay. So, I see we've got some events coming up. Where are we headed?
So we're headed to a rally at the USS Wisconsin in Norfolk. It's got a large military population, so we be able to appeal to that population of current military and veterans. And that also
I'm
speaks
sorry, you said Wisconsin?
the USS Wisconsin in Norfolk, Virginia.
Oh, okay, just, all right.
Just to be clear.
Yeah, I thought we were in Wisconsin.
And this will be a great opportunity for you to talk about your foreign policy and your military policy and establish credibility with those two sources. And just having that image of a battleship in the background is going to play very well on national media.
Great, and, I mean, that day is also,
Oh yeah, we're looking at, that is Halloween, but we're still going to have you in like regular clothes, right?
well, I just think that the other candidates, their foreign policies are pretty spooky, right? Like, they lack leadership.
If you can play on that.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
I think there's an opportunity there. So, all right, what else? Where have we been? I guess
And
today's the
then
26th?
Today's 29th.
Okay.
So a couple of your last appearances have been in New Hampshire. That's an early primary state, so an important place to establish your credibility and support within the population. It was a town hall meeting, and it was moderated by Matt Lauer with the Today Show, so that's free national coverage. Always good for the Trump image. And that was also a good opportunity for you to sit down one-on-one with him to advance your policy positions in the way that you want to within this backdrop of the Today Show. And then you were also at the Miami Resort owned by yourself, and that's where you tend to give a lot of your stump speeches where you'll be launching what you'll be saying for the rest of the week. And it was also a great opportunity for you to connect with the Latino voters in Florida, which is where you're leading right now.
Go on.
And we received very positive media coverage, especially from the Miami Herald, which emphasized that this event brought diversity to the Trump base.
Great. And so outside of the Herald coverage, is this working for us?
Having events here is, people always like to hear what we have to say at the resort because we do launch our stump speeches for the week from there.
Okay, but I meant just the calendar so far. Does this seem to be working for us? How do we know that it's been effective? Outside of the Herald piece, like that's one metric of success, right? Positive coverage from the Herald. How else do we know that the town hall in New Hampshire is a working strategy? The battleship in Norfolk. Why do we think that these venues are the types of places that would be most successful?
For sure. So if we look at the national polls, then we are leading. And I think that's an important indicator for the tone and the pulse of the Trump campaign nationwide.
Okay. Any other metrics of success?
I also think that it's important to look at in terms of where we're staging events. Like any Trump property is a home base where we're really guaranteed a positive population, relatively, I think, positive coverage. So I think those are sort of the events that are always a safe bet. But I think sort of being able to look at how our events are being covered against other politicians who are campaigning, we're drawing larger crowds than other candidates. We're also we're getting our media out, and not just in the local papers, which is really important for the local area, but we're getting in national papers, online media as well. We're maintaining our presence on Twitter, so I think that's really good for the campaign.
That's what I like to hear. Rallies are always big for us. We want to draw big crowds. We don't want the small, intimate settings. It's worked for us in the past. Let's keep moving with it. I like what I see. What's our message?
So our message for the week, we're focusing on two main areas. So we're focusing first and foremost on legitimacy. So I think this is the biggest obstacle that the media and the rest of the candidates have thrown at us. They see this candidacy as a sham, as just a businessman trying to get his word in, but we're taking this extremely seriously. And we think that first and foremost, we can help push legitimacy by pointing out those who lack legitimacy. And we think Carson, one of our biggest rivals in the polls right now, who sort of fits in with our message a little bit and is drawing from the same base, by pointing out his lacking of legitimacy in terms of his experience only as a neurosurgeon, whereas your experience as a businessman, as a negotiator, really can play into the office of the presidency. And then also, as we've worked on you with your recent speeches, we've been helping to, I don't want to say tone down some of the rhetoric, but to emphasize some amount of vulnerability and desiring to really work for the presidency. In a recent speech in Iowa, you talked about how you're disappointed that you weren't leading in the polls in Iowa, and that you want to get back to the top and you want to please the Iowan people. So I really think gaining that legitimacy will be really important for the campaign. Then more on the policy-oriented side, we think that foreign policy will be the big driving message for you this week. So obviously we think that the rally at the UTS Wisconsin will sort of help to launch this forward, but we think that your American first foreign policy and the sort of incentive-based interventionism with allied support that you've been pushing can really works with the American people, and it's a sort of a new brand of foreign policy that none of the other GOP are offering. They're mostly saying we should be more aggressive, but I think our version is more scaled back and more realistic for the American people.
So how do we make this snackable or digestible? How do we articulate exactly what you just said, but in a soundbite? And what's the like one of our major campaign themes? You know, we want to make America great again, but now you're knocking me on that. I heard someone say just last night, America's already great. You know, and so how do we what can people hold on to? What can we leave them with?
Continue with your America First campaign slogan that you began with this August, I believe it was. Rather than being just policy-wise, not so much isolationist, but realist in a sense on the international stage. Focusing on making sure that American interests are what's being cared for, not just national interests, but national security interests are the priority. In comparison to some of the other candidates who have just sent out blanket statements about policy in general and change needs to happen,
Right.
you have a very party-centric line that you can push in terms of having America first.
And that
in terms of
any
foreign policy.
that any amount of foreign intervention, or whether it's something with Syrian refugees or with any sort of intervention into any sovereignty, it would only happen if A, it helps American interests, but B, we have allied support that also wants that same thing. So not doing anything alone without any support, that's not something that the Trump brand wants to do.
I get it, but I think another thing that we like to think of is not getting too much into the weeds, right? Like, we've got the people in leadership now are losers, and we're losing as a country, and the American people want winners, right? And so, should we stick with that? Should we stick with the theme of being a winner versus sticking with the current lot of losers? Or should we get into these policy weeds that you're talking about?
It's tough. I definitely think the winner-loser rhetoric works with some, but obviously, as a leader of the United States, you're not going to win every single battle. So I think, although some people will hang on to the winners versus losers rhetoric, but I think articulating some of the pragmatic benefits the campaign has to offer will be really important to voters.
So then here's my final question on the messages. Who's our audience? Are they donors? Are they voters? Are they the media? This one seems like it might be the media.
Yeah, so I think Americans obviously pay attention a lot to the media, and that's where a lot of the coverage accusing the campaign of being a joke is coming from. And I think by offering them sort of the tidbit of of a bigger substance for them to digest, that would generate positive coverage and more academic pieces. Like Foreign Policy Magazine came out with a piece just a couple of days ago calling Trump's foreign policy the best articulated GOP foreign policy out there. So I definitely think that would certainly help with the media and then translate back down to the people.
To voters?
Yes.
Okay, and how do we deal with these other guys in the polls? Dr. Carson, I kind of like him.
Well, liking him is one thing, but then running against him is another, and your candidacy at the moment can be stronger than him because of policy first off. He's been very weak on the policy front, and it's very well known that that's one of his things where he's trying to step up now. Maybe not so much going after him, but making your own points clear, making sure that you stick to your guns in terms of policy steps that you've made the last 3-4 weeks even will be more than enough to counter at the moment. That, and then both him and Jeb Bush are completely opposite in yourself in that they are really reliant on super PACs. Most of the American people like the fact that you are a self-made candidate, that it's your money going into it. And you can say that this anomaly that's developed in the last 10 years in terms of super PACs and money coming from outside supporting a candidacy is not in the American people's best interest when they're putting forward money that could be put towards making this country better. It's getting put towards a candidacy where you yourself are the best candidate may intend to be a waste in almost, that we don't want to have that. So your self-made, self-energized way of running for the candidacy is the most honest thing you can present.
And what about Rubio?
Rubio has his He came back at this statement during the debate last night, as you probably heard, but you can still come after
You're
his
standing next to me.
Yes. For one thing, you can't help but to hear that. But that's one of the things, in terms of doing his job well, he already represents the country and the people of this country in a manner that he hasn't stepped up 100% to the plate to. Regardless of whether he feels that running for president is in the best interest of the country, regardless of whether he feels that or not, he has a job that he's already been appointed to, trusted with, and hasn't shown up to even the hearings for.
Yeah, didn't Bush attack him on that same point and get eviscerated? So you're saying that's what you want me to do?
Not so much attack, but go after the point that you want people to focus on the jobs that they have, so that you want people to prove the success that they've had in the past. If you can't succeed in the past, how can you prove to do so in the future? Getting eviscerated on national TV is different because you're presenting something. There's always a flaw in the slight statement. The way that Bush presented it was not in the best way possible. There are ways you can do this.
Mr. Trump, I think it's something you understand very well. I mean, you're a rich man. You made yourself, and we look to your past successes in order to diagnose how we think you'll do in the future. So I think by looking at Rubio's past and talking about, look, if you don't succeed in the past, if you don't hold yourself to a high enough standard, how can we expect you to continue in the future? You have the positive record with you, but pointing out Rubio's record of not being there, I think that is diagnostic of his future.
Most of my attacks on my opponents haven't been on their record or on the policies. I've seemed to have been doing pretty well, attacking them on a personal level, for who they are, maybe what they might look like, or side comments. So, and that's been working for me, right? I've been leading in the polls. So you're telling me I should switch strategies now?
That shift we saw last night in what you said, though, you shifted even a little bit away from that, and many of the more moderate venues, the more moderate media outlets have actually really been receptive of that. That shift away from going from the personal to more about yourself and how you can present yourself to the country as a presidential candidate it has shown major reviews. I saw even on CNN they put that at the end of the, by the way, one of the most well-rounded, best presidential-looking candidate on stage for this evening was because you backed off of the personal and went policy, your own self, and how while you haven't been president before, you can be a great president.
Very observant. And so after this rally on Saturday, Halloween, maybe we might have a press conference. Anything I should be ready for? Any questions that any blind spots or something that news of the day that might pop up? What are they going to ask outside of the presidential election? Like what else is going on in the news that it might be asked about?
So I don't know to what I think like with conservative media, I think we're doing pretty okay in terms of any possible sort of gotcha questions or anything else. I mean, obviously, like there are big issues going on in the world that they could try to surprise the campaign on, but I don't think there's anything really in particular that we wouldn't be prepared to answer. I think we've articulated our position on Syria, we've articulated our position on terror, we've articulated our main positions in terms of NATO and our allies in Europe, so I think we do have most of our bases covered here.